Hi there, Father John Hollowell here, and this Christmas break I had the opportunity to sit down and watch a Netflix series that my younger siblings had been telling me about. They said, John, you're going to love this, this is right up your alley, and I had just not really had an opportunity to sit down and take it all in until, of course, things slow down even for priests over the Christmas holiday, and so I sat down and watched the series, and it was one of those things that I remember at the very end of the first season of Stranger Things, I literally applauded at the very end. I've never done that for a movie. I love movies. I've never done it for a TV show. I applauded in my rectory by myself as the credits rolled from the end of the first season. It was such a great and fantastic ending, and I think just a really well done series. And so I just wanted to take a little bit of an opportunity to dive in. I know that filming has just begun for season 3, and so many of you have already probably, if you are a fan of Stranger Things and are watching now, watching this video today, then you've probably already seen the first 2 seasons. But this is just going to be a little bit of a look at the first season of Stranger Things, because I think as I was watching it, there's so much that was there, that was in it. I think that was Catholic, and not just that there was stuff in it that was Catholic, but it was the stuff that made it so good. I think has its roots in our Catholic faith, and I think it would just be good to. I thought it would be good to just take a little bit of an opportunity to dive into that for anybody that would want to watch that. I would say that if you've not seen season 1 of Stranger Things, and there are some spoilers in this, so you may want to go watch season 1 of Stranger Things, and then come back and maybe listen to this or watch this video. So just wanted to go through some of the themes that jumped out at me in a really profound way as I watched season 1 of Stranger Things. So one of the first things that struck me is the way in which the heroine, really, in many ways, is a young girl who, of course, is throughout most of season 1, we at least see her story where she has been experimented on by the government for many years. And as you see this happening, some of it's done via flashbacks and so forth, but as you see this young woman, this young girl, really, of course, being experimented on and at least psychologically, tortured in some ways and held prisoner and all of these kind of things, your heart as a person, you instantly you fall in love with her and you want to rescue her, right? You see the how evil it is, and nothing highlights evil like when we see it being perpetrated on a child. And so when we see it in the film or in the show, for me that was the reaction that I had. This desire. Your heart is pulled in that direction. And I think what that shows us is, in many ways, I think, first of all, one of the things that we see, that I think the major theme, that for me, and I think it's been a major theme for certainly going back to John Paul II, Pope John Paul II wrote a phenomenal, sort of a groundbreaking book called Love and Responsibility, and he makes the case in there, and many people have reflected on this. I think it's really a key teaching of the Church, that the opposite of to love someone is to use them, right? The opposite of to love is to use another person. And I think that gets to this notion on the positive side. We call that, in the Catholic Church, a respect for the dignity of every person. Right? That's what it means, to honor the dignity that every human person has, no matter how small, no matter how defenseless they are, no matter what their situation, rich or poor. We treat every human person the same way. We honor them with the same amount of dignity, and we give them that same amount of dignity because they're made in the image and likeness of God. And so the negative side of that is that we are to never use another person for anything. And so to see then, most of it again is psychological, although of course there is some of the violence that's done to the young woman, of course, is also physical in nature. But we see them using her because she has these special powers right? And so the government is studying her and is trying to use her as a weapon, right? That's their only desire is to get and harness her power. So they're trying to use her. So when you and I watch the series and we see someone trying to use a child, right, at the expense of the child, right, our heart breaks for that. And so it shows us, I think it gives us, it just cuts right to the heart of the matter. And we see, again, when we look at it happening with a young person, we think that's wrong. It's wrong to use a person, right? You have to respect the dignity that every human person has. And we start to see in evil people this desire to use other people for what it is that we can get out of them, right? And so I think it just gives a beautiful insight through this character of this young child for us to realize and be able to stand up as Catholics and say, that's why we say it's wrong to use, right? That's why we say it's always wrong, always evil to use another person, right? And that we have to honor the dignity of every person, no matter how small, no matter how what their age, etc. Okay, I thought another really powerful, I think, scene is fairly early on in season 1, and it involves human sexuality, right? And when I first watched this series, I actually went back and watched a lot of the parts of the first series even a second time, because it's just like any other piece of art. When you go back through things, you go back and you look at a painting, you see new things. So I watched parts of season 1 a second time. The first time I went through, we see the sister, Nancy Wheeler, of the kind of the central family of the story, right? Whose younger brother and this and Elle character are good friends, and their friendship and relationship really kind of takes center stage. But the older sister in the family, Nancy, is a high school teenager, and basically, the captain of the football team, of course, is attracted to her, and she gives her virginity to this man, this high school student. And when I first saw that, I kind of just, you just kind of glance over. I didn't think too much about how it was handled. But when I came back to it, I wanted to look at it and see, okay, how is this exactly treated? How is this sexual encounter, this young woman, sadly, of course, right, losing her virginity to this high school, jock? How is it treated as a specific instance of that? And I found something to be very powerful. I think the second season of Stranger Things, this is all I'll say about that. I think the way that the second season of Stranger Things handles the sexual nature of different relationships, I think is not good. I found it to be confusing. I found it to be not in line with or authentic to the human experience per se. But that's maybe we'll tackle that some other day. But I found that, first of all, for Nancy and her encounter, there's a lot of this recognition that as tied into this encounter that she has with this young man, Nancy's friend actually, at the same time that Nancy is giving herself away in that way to this young man, Nancy's friend, whom she had abandoned at the party, is slowly killed by the monster of the series. It's a sci-fi, there's a science fiction element, of course, to this whole thing. If you've seen it, you know that, of course, right? So, again, and I thought as it was being filmed, I thought it was really fascinating how they filmed that, where, and again, there's nothing terribly graphic, thankfully, about it, but you get the point of what's happening with Nancy and this young man, Steve. But as they kind of cut back and forth between Nancy and her friend, who is now outside, who's been abandoned, and as Nancy and Steve's encounter is progressing, I think very, very beautifully the series kind of highlights or cuts back and forth with Nancy's friend, who is now being killed. And I think there's this, and as the scenes go forward from there, Nancy, when she comes home that evening, her mother stops her. You can see the pain and the sorrow in Nancy. She tries to hide what's happened. She lies to her mother. Her mother knows or has a great inclination, I think, as all mothers do, about what has just happened. But the way that whole interaction, it's portrayed, I think, very. I think the church has always said, or not the church, but I mean, I think I hear lots of people who try to comment on culture, and I agree 100%. I've always said to students, just as my own personal opinion, that I feel like as long as, if things are portrayed in an accurate way, you know, whether that's human sexuality, whether that's, you know, crime, murder, those kinds of things. And I think that when we look at how the bishops of the United States have always rated films and TV shows, we see this. If it's treated in a way where when sins are committed, there's authentic and real remorse and pain that's involved, then that, I think, is a good thing for us to encounter, right? And to see. It can be sort of a tale where we can show other people and remind ourselves, no, when I fall into sin, there's pain involved, there's hurt, and all these things. I let other people down, I let myself down, I harm myself, right? And so we see that in Nancy as she moves forward, a recognition that she's harmed herself a great deal, and there is remorse and sadness on her part, and again, even leading to the death of her friend Nancy, because had she stayed with her friend and not gone with Steve and spent the night with Steve, then her friend would probably still be alive. And so, again, I think the sin of Nancy falling in that way was really well done, and was treated in an authentic way and in a helpful way. The other thing that I liked about the series as it progressed into further episodes past that is that Steve is not treated, as I first thought he would be, as the sort of stock character who is the athletic jock, who is dumb, who has no emotions, no feelings at all. Right? That's so often how, and it was shaping up to be, he was shaping up to be that kind of character through the first couple of episodes. But what we see in Steve as well, Steve here, we see somebody had spread rumors and had vandalized a local sign about Nancy and her sexual indiscretions and her giving away of her virginity. Steve actually then gets in a fight with those who have done that. Steve starts to show remorse for what he has done. He is sorry about the way that he has treated Nancy. He apologizes. He goes in and tries to make that wrong a right when he finds out about it. And I thought it was just really well done, and it shows a nice path out of sin for people, how to handle and how to respond to when we recognize what we have done. What we need to do is seek forgiveness, right? That there's hope for us. I think, again, we've seen that stock character so often that if Steve had we wouldn't have learned much from Steve if Steve had just kind of continued to, bed other women or Nancy throughout the rest of the episodes. But we see, I think, a really human treatment of Steve by the people, the creators of the show, that I think is really well done and is Catholic in that sense of showing the power that mercy has, that forgiveness has. And so I just really liked how they handled Steve and Nancy falling into a very serious sin, but how the power of remorse can help people move out of that pain of those grave and serious sins. So I thought that was helpful. And a good job. Now we move to Elle. I know this is a little bit dark. It might be hard to see. Probably should have picked a better picture than this one. But this is the young girl who I first showed you, Elle. What happens is, as Elle escapes from this facility where she's being experimented on, right? She makes her way to the Wheeler household. And there she's embraced by four young men, four good friends who are all hanging out and are good friends. They play video games together and that kind of thing. And they're all about the same age. They're probably all 11 or 12 or 13 years old. And as Elle stumbles into the family, the kids, the friends all find her, and they bring her home and kind of hide her downstairs at first. So they try to figure out what to do and how to help her. And it's just a really beautiful treatment, I think, of showing kind of a welcoming those who have nowhere else to turn, right? A welcoming of those who are persecuted, who have nothing, right? The poor, in that sense, she has nothing. She has no family. She has no money, no food, literally nothing. She's escaped from this facility, and she doesn't even really know how to interact in many ways. She's really doesn't speak, at least very much at first, and that kind of stuff. These young men take her in and care for her. Now, not perfectly, of course, but they're kids, right? And I think that's handled really well. But they bring her in, they care for her, they show her love, right? And it's amazing to see what happens from this girl, this as she's first escaped, and almost kind of animalistic, because she's been treated that way for so long. She's been treated like an animal. She's been used so much as this child that she doesn't even, she's almost forgotten her own dignity. She's almost forgotten her own humanity in many ways, right? And that's understandable. And again, it's in one sense, it's a horrible reminder of how that can happen to so many. I think there are so many people walking our streets today who are adults, but who have been treated so poorly, who've been used by so many people, that they too have forgotten in many ways the dignity that they have and the humanity that they have. It takes other people sometimes to remind us of that, to undo or reverse or try to start reversing the damage that others have done to these people, right? And so as these young men start to treat her with respect and care for her and show her love, right? They want what's best for her. In many instances, she begins to recognize her humanity and begins to become a human person in the fullest sense. And it's just a beautiful process to see. This is a scene that I love, where one of the young men, she walks out, they need to get her a disguise, so they find her a wig and a dress and that kind of stuff. And she comes in, she walks out, and she sees herself in the mirror. And she says, and then we hear Mike saying, wow, you're pretty. And then she's like, pretty, and then he says pretty good, and so, but he does think, of course, that she is pretty. She sees this humanity start to come back to her, particularly as other people affirm her, even positively affirming her, in the ways of young love, and saying, wow, you're beautiful, that kind of thing. It begins to awaken in her this thing that we had seen taken from her throughout the beginning of the series, right? So this is a really beautiful, again, kind of meditation, artistic portrayal of human dignity and the role that plays in what happens when it's attacked, but how to give it back to people when it's been lost or forsaken. Now, with her powers, then we're getting now down to the end, right? And so we wanted to reflect a little bit on the powers that this young woman has, right? She has a sort of telekinetic power and an ability to move things and to use her mind to control things and manipulate things in many ways. And so there's one point where she uses her powers to help Mike, right? She uses her powers to help one of her friends that has again taken her in. And she's afraid of her powers, right? She sees in herself the powers that she has, and she says, I am this monster. I am the monster that everyone's worried about, that everyone's running from, right? The evil character, the evil sci-fi monster that's actually real, that everyone's afraid of and running from and looking for and all that kind of stuff. She knows that, but she sees this power that's in her, and she's afraid. I'm the monster. Right? And I think that for me, what I was thinking of when I saw that the first time is that I think for us, so often, we have great power, right? We have this great power that's given to us. We can act as God acts, right? Through our love, through the things that we do, through the decisions that we make in a good way and in a positive way. We can literally be the presence of God to other people, right? But yet I think with our powers and with the abilities that we've been given, and sometimes through misusing them, right? We fear. Many people have a fear that that the dominant reality in my life is evil. What defines me at my core is a sort of darkness or an evil presence, or I am a bad person at the core, or at the root of who I am. And so I think her cry here is very real. It's very much the one that you and I have when we see our powers. At times when we fear, am I evil? Is that who I am? And her friend whom she rescues says to her, no, you saved me. You're not the monster. And I think Christ is always telling us that, right? When we begin to be despairing or worried, is this who I am? Is this what defines me? We hear that voice of the Good Shepherd calling us all the time and telling us, no, no, no. You are not defined by those things. You have great power, but you are not a monster. You are a person who is loved and who has great dignity, right? And so it was just beautiful to see that fear kind of named in a science fiction way, I think, that we all have. Am I a monster, right? Is this who I am? That is shown to be not true. Now, finally, the end, the last, basically, the dramatic showdown between the young woman and the actual monster is also a very beautiful portrayal of sacrifice and love, right? So here we see the classroom, we see Elle, the young woman, recognizing that it is her call to go face this monster. The monster has burst into the room, and no one else can do anything about it. Her friends, the boys are shooting rocks at the monster that is all powerful, and all of these things. But Elle knows with her mind, she has the ability to stop this monster. And so she knows it's going to cost her, because when she uses her power, it hurts and it begins to drain, and she bleeds from her brain and so forth. So I love the point where the monster, Elle uses her power and flattens the monster against the wall, and she says, no more, right? And then she turns to her friend, her boyfriend at this point, in a sense, right, of this boyfriend, young love of Mike. She turns particularly to Mike, but to all four of the boys, and she says, goodbye, Mike. And then she proceeds to go to the point where she gives her life, or pushes herself to that point, right, where she kills the monster, but she also then is killed, in a sense, in that encounter. Very much, probably the most Christ-like character exchange, the most, I would say, in fiction and in film and in TV shows, all those things together, books, novels. This may be, for me, the most Christ-like, the most accurate sort of artistic impression of what it was like for Christ slaying the devil through the cross, giving his life, right, for that. Now, of course, there is in season 2, as you know, don't listen if you don't want to have a spoiler, but in season 2, she comes back. There's a resurrection of sorts. But it's just a very beautiful portrayal of the sacrifice that Christ makes. And so I just want to end this with an encouragement. If you have a spare 8 hours, maybe next Christmas break or some other time on a vacation, I think you would really enjoy sitting down and watching the 10 episodes of the first season of Stranger Things. I think there's a lot of Catholicism there. And I hope that maybe if you have already seen it, something in this talk might have helped you appreciate it even more. And we'll try to do this more often and kind of look at some different items, different films and things like that as the opportunity presents itself. So God bless you and all that you're doing, and keep me in your prayers, and have a great week.